There were many unique things about the last 28 days. One of them is this. In any other war, in any other conflict, the civilian population can flee. They can run and try and hide. But in this case, the people who were about to rain down death and destruction on the Palestinian refugees in Gaza took the precaution of locking all the gates so that the people could not escape. They were dropping leaflets from the sky, telling people they were about to bomb, telling people to leave their homes when they knew that the people had nowhere else to go. The doors to Gaza were locked, just like a concentration camp. Gates are locked, and the barbarians then rained down death and destruction upon them. And what a death and what a destruction. They used weapons so fearsome that they're banned under international law. Not content with having sitting ducks to fire at with normal weapons, they brought to the battlefield weapons of such ferocity that they're actually banned under international law. You've seen them. White phosphorus, for example. Do you know what white phosphorus is? It's gas. Can you imagine a state calling itself the Jewish state dropping gas on a civilian population which could not escape them? What does that remind you of? White phosphorus enters through the mouth and the nose and begins to cook its victim from the inside. The victim bakes once they have inhaled this gas, and they begin to breathe white smoke as their insides bake and they die in excruciating agony. Depleted uranium weapons, fragmentation bombs, all sorts of ferocious weapons of death. They didn't have to smuggle their weapons in through tunnels, of course. They're always going on about tunnels, Israel. Of course, they don't need any tunnels. They get all their weapons free of charge from the United States of America, right off the assembly line and into their armed forces. The Palestinian people, to defend themselves against F-16s, Apache helicopter gunships, warships, tanks, heavy artillery, all the panoply of modern war, had only that which they could bring in through tunnels. By definition, small arms, unsophisticated arms, no match for the military adversary which was assailing them. Our own government, after being silent for 3 days, finally spoke, and spoke to blame the victims rather than the aggressor. Gordon Brown and David Miliband said this was all about these guns. Well, let me say it's not the view necessarily of the organisers of this event, but it's my view. I say this: why should the Palestinian people not have weapons? Why should they be the only people in the world without weapons with which to defend themselves? I'm going to Gaza soon. I'm carrying nappies and duvets and bedsteads and all the things the Palestinian people need. But if I could take 10,000 Kalashnikovs with me, I would take 10,000 Kalashnikovs with me, because the Palestinian people have the same right to defend themselves as any other people do. Why shouldn't they have weapons? So they can be killed even more easily, in even larger numbers. And of course, we only saw, if we were unlucky and didn't have Press TV, Sky 515, Al Jazeera TV, Sky 514, if we didn't have Al Jazeera Arabic, if we didn't have other international satellites, and we were relying on the BBC and Sky News, the gruesome twosome of the British media, who both refused to broadcast the charitable appeal, but broadcast every night, night after night, a parade of Israeli propagandists dressed up in uniforms, in their South African accents and their American accents. If we were, in a way, lucky enough to be able to watch Press TV, to be able to watch Al Jazeera, then we saw the results of this horrific crime. And if we did, we will never forget it. Girl, to recover her body because Israel warned them that they would kill the ambulance men if they did enter the Zaytuna area of Gaza City. And all these bodies lay there for 4 days and 4 nights. And the man held this little girl up, her leg eaten off, her arm eaten off, her body savaged by dogs. They showed that on Al Jazeera, but they never showed it in Britain until Jon Snow last week. So many other stories, especially from Zaytuna, an area I know well, where they destroyed all the houses. But because there were high-value resistance targets in Zaytuna, they forbade any Red Cross or other medical emergency services to enter. And when, after 4 days, the ambulance men arrived, amongst many horrors, they found 2 small, dead babies, starved to death, still suckling on the toes of their dead mothers. Keep these images in your mind the next time you hear the BBC insist on impartiality in the face of such barbarianism. These great crimes were carried out in front of the so-called international community. The United Nations took 7 long days, during which time more than 1,000 people had been killed, to pass a resolution. If you could call it a resolution, it wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. It called on Israel to stop, and Israel told the United Nations to get stuffed. And you know what? The United Nations just got stuffed. No sanctions, no threats, no warnings. Not like Iraq, of course. They broke Iraq on a wheel in defense of so-called United Nations resolutions. They killed 1 million Iraqis under sanctions and another 1 million Iraqis in the war because they said the United Nations cannot be defied. Well, Israel has defied the United Nations since the day that the United Nations set Israel up in the first place. It has broken more international law, more Security Council resolutions than all the other countries of the world put together. And no one has ever lifted a finger